voters on sustainable energy in Connecticut communities. We're really pleased that you were able to come out on this cold night and talk about our energy needs and how we can handle them in a sustainable manner. Our moderator this evening is someone familiar to many of you, Representative Lonnie Reed, who's the House Chair of the Connecticut General Assembly Energy and Technology Committee, and she will lead our panel of experts in a discussion. So, Lonnie, would you like to start?
Sure. Carol, thank you so much, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this together. You're doing some amazing programs. Actually, the Commissioner and I have been involved in a couple, storm response and those kinds of things, and so this is really great that we can talk about these things. I have some wonderful panel members with me, so I want to introduce them now. There is the Commissioner of the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, Dan Esty. We have George Keithan, who is President and Consulting of the Consulting Engineering Services Corporation, and he lives in a LEED Platinum home, so he's living the dream. We have Jeff Lendroth, who's with Munger Construction here in Branford. This is an amazing company, and he's the sustainability consultant. And Jeff's company is very much involved in really building other companies so that they can save energy. And he's been doing this for several years, so it'll be good to hear from him as well. And we have Carrie O'Neill, who's the Director of Residential Programs for the Clean Energy Finance and Investment Authority, CEFIA, which is something that the legislature, working with DEEP and the governor, created a couple of years ago. That was one of our genius ideas. CEFIA, which is also frequently called the Green Bank, pulls together private public funding to invest in clean energy, and we've had some amazing successes. So I'm going to be happy to hear from Carrie tonight. We've called this program What's Now, What's Next, What's Affordable, What's Not Ready for Prime Time. And one reason that we wanted to do that was, as chair of the House Chair of the Energy Committee, I actually even hear it from my own committee members. We hear so many things that are going on in energy, and at times it gets really confusing. You know, are we talking about something, is this fuel cell thing you're talking about something that we can implement now, or how far off is this, and you know, what are the affordability factors and that kind of thing. So we kind of wanted to get started talking about, number one, we did a very ambitious comprehensive energy strategy, which is taking us from now forward as a state and as a region. And Commissioner Esty and the governor and those of us in the legislature who really believed in this worked together to make this happen. So I'm going to tee it off by asking Commissioner Esty, what are the primary elements of this, and where are we?
Lonnie, thank you very much, and thank you not only for inviting me to be here with you tonight, but thank you for what has been a fabulous last year with your leadership as the co-chair of the Legislative Energy Committee, which has had a fantastic build-out of what I think is, as you've described it, the leading energy strategy of any state in the country. And I hear constantly as I give talks about this around the country and around New England that people say, we wish the federal government could do as much. And I think it's a testament, frankly, to one of the starting points for our efforts, which is that we really try to work to bridge gaps. It's a state plan that works closely with communities. It's a plan that the legislature has defined with some guidance and support from the executive branch, but it's a back and forth process. It's a process where Democrats and Republicans have come together, and it's really been passed by the legislature by overwhelming bipartisan majorities, again, something that other states are awed by and, frankly, we wish we might see in Washington. It's got 5 core elements, but with a starting principle that I really want to get on the table right at the outset, which is that the goal of this strategy, and Governor Malloy has been very clear on this from his first day in office, is a cheaper, cleaner, and more reliable energy future for the state of Connecticut. And I think it's that package that's really resonated. In much of the country, particularly you might caricature this as blue states, there's been a big focus on clean energy, but lack of attention to making that cheaper and therefore cost effective and ensuring that the economic base we all need is strong. In what we might caricature as red states, There has been a focus on cheap energy without attention to the need to make it cleaner. And that's an imperative as well. In Connecticut, we think cheaper, cleaner, and because we've had 5 major storms that have knocked out power across the state, more reliable is the right framework. The first issue up in our agenda is energy efficiency, because the energy you don't consume is by far your best strategy. So we have a very broad-based focus, and Carrie will talk some more about this, of trying to promote energy efficiency across all sectors. So we start with government. We've got a big lead by example effort that is focused on bringing down energy spending in government. And by the way, not only at the state level, at the municipal level, we also want to include all government supported buildings. So hospitals, schools, universities, 52% of the buildings that the state of Connecticut owns, by the way, are in higher education. So all of that agenda is part of it. We have a big push in for residential energy efficiency. And in that regard, it's not just houses, but apartments, condos, senior living centers. And then, of course, a focus on the commercial industrial sector, where we really would like to see our Connecticut industries spending less on energy and therefore having more to invest in growth, in jobs, in prosperity, and in success. So energy efficiency is our first goal, and we're trying in that regard to go beyond what has historically been what I call light energy efficiency, which is literally changing out the light bulbs, perhaps doing some weather stripping. We want to drive towards deep energy efficiency, excuse the pun for those who know the acronym of my department, but deep energy efficiency means heating, lighting, air conditioning, ventilation, insulation, windows, furnaces, boilers, every appliance in the building up to and including the Coke machine. How do you minimize the energy consumption from all of that? And it requires a package of incentives to really get all of that taken care of. Second agenda item is energy supply. We need a more diverse energy supply in the state of Connecticut and across New England. And in that regard, we are very eager to build out our portfolio of renewable energy options. So we've set up a structured set of financing programs to build out small-scale renewables inside the state of Connecticut, rooftop solar, small wind projects, et cetera. And in fact, this year we'll see deployment of renewable energy at 10 times the scale of any previous year before Governor Malloy took office. So prior to 2010, we had done at the most about 5 or 6 megawatts. We're headed for about 50 megawatts of renewable energy this year. A stunning turnaround. We're also procuring renewable energy at grid scale, big projects. For 15 years, Connecticut's had a renewable portfolio standard that committed us to ratchet up our percent of our power that comes from renewable sources. That 15-year program has produced how many grid-scale wind projects? Does anyone know? 0. How many grid-scale solar projects? 0. So we have now, in the last month, procured 270 megawatts of wind and solar power, big-scale projects. And it's not just that we've, again, taken this up by tenfold over the 15-year record of not building out a renewable portfolio base, not doing more than really providing energy credits to some biomass projects that are not very clean and certainly not cutting-edge technology. But we have done so at record-setting low prices. So we're using a different approach to procure renewable energy, using a reverse auction that allowed us to buy those wind projects and solar projects at under 8 cents a kilowatt hour average out over the next 15 years. So it is a stunningly low price. The grid scale fossil fuel alternatives are at about 7.7 cents a kilowatt hour. So we're very close to grid parity, as it's called, meaning that we're bringing down those costs of renewables to a point where they'll compete toe-to-toe with the existing fossil fuel status quo. That's very exciting. Because if you ask, what's the answer to the question here? What's next and what's now? The next that we're aiming for is to bring down the price of renewable power under the price of fossil fuel power. And the day we have that happen, we have a transformation, not only in our energy future, but our environmental future, and for that matter, our economic future. So that's the big goal, and we're really doing a lot to drive that. 3 other quick elements of the strategy. Transportation. A significant part of our energy consumption is in transportation. We're working to build out an approach that allows the Connecticut drivers and citizens to have much more in the way of choice, starting with communities that are planned with smarter growth as a vision, but also looking for better public transit, and then for choice in terms of alternative fuels and alternative vehicles. So we're building out a network of electric vehicle charging stations, a structure of natural gas filling stations, and even some hydrogen filling stations that would support fuel cell vehicles. The goal being to provide choice going forward so that people are not afraid to try one of these new options for fear that there won't be a way to charge up if you have an electric car, to fill up if you have a natural gas or a fuel cell car. We are also trying to take advantage in Connecticut of the big breakthrough in energy across the country over the last 3 or 4 years, which is the availability of shale gas, domestically available natural gas that is coming in at scale that is unprecedented and at prices that are much lower than the fossil fuel baseline of the last 30 or 40 years. So again, the big news story is that for the last 40 years, a natural gas recognized to be cleaner than oil or coal has sold at a premium to oil and coal. Today it is under the price of those two and about half the price and half the emissions of coal. So we have a cheaper, cleaner fuel choice for the base energy source of our country for the next couple of decades, and that is natural gas. We're trying to build out the infrastructure that makes it available as a choice to more of our citizens, more of our businesses. Final agenda item is resiliency. We need to be prepared for the kind of storms that we've seen now time and time again over the last 3 years. Increased intensity and frequency of hurricanes, ice storms, snowstorms. We live in New England. I got hit by snowflakes today on the way to work. So we know that these storms will come again, and we need to be prepared, better prepared than we have been in the last few years. So we have a game plan of tree trimming, investing in better utility poles, wires, more sensors on the line, a smarter grid that'll allow us to bounce back more quickly, understand where our problems are. And we're also investing in that regard in microgrids, the opportunity to move away from a few big power plants providing our electricity to a structure of distributed generation, a network of smaller scale power stations, some of which are, and this is the critical point for a microgrid, separatable from the big grid. Because if you're integrated with the big grid and power goes down, you go down, you don't have power. So what we're trying to do is to set up some number of places where there's a structure of what are known as trips and transfers that allow us to island, separate these distributed generation sources, and in doing so, keep up the facilities they support, whether that's a police and a fire station, in some cases it would be a hospital, it might be a sewage treatment plant or a prison, the places you can't have power go down. But we also, and this is a big breakthrough that Governor Malloy has pushed us to do, we want to keep up and running not just those essential public services, but some number of essential commercial services, a gas station, a grocery store, a bank, and a pharmacy. Because while the power is certain to go out again, there will be more storms, there will be more hurricanes. If people have access to food, water, can get money in their medicines, the burden on everyday life is not quite so big as we faced with these outages that went a week or 8 or 9 days. So the essential elements of our model, and it really is a new approach to this energy future that we're trying to build, cheaper, cleaner, more reliable. The essential elements include trying to avoid having the government pick winners, but really harness the entrepreneurial spirit of America, which is a great country for private sector fresh thinking, and to build out a base that encourages competition and trying out lots of ideas, a lot of innovation. So we're really trying to spur innovation. We recognize we're in a time of limited government money, so we want to use that money to leverage private capital and really get a lot of businesses in to take up the charge, which is why it's such a thrill to have several business leaders here talking about what they're doing. And I think the Green Bank, which Carrie's going to talk about, is kind of a big breakthrough in this idea of using our limited government money to leverage private capital. And I'm sure she'll tell you, but it's a model now that a lot of other states are picking up with. Just last month, New York set up its Green Bank, modeled expressly on Connecticut's approach. And the goal with the Green Bank is to flow more money, more capital into energy efficiency, into renewable power, into helping people switch to natural gas if they prefer that as their cheaper, cleaner source of fuel for heating over the next decade or two. And finally, I think we do want to spur the development at scale of renewable power with the hope that that will help bring down the cost, and that over time we can succeed in what I call the big win, which is to bring that cost of renewable power under our existing fossil fuel structure of today. So that's what we're up to. Some of it does fit what's now. Some of it is up next and not too far away. And there are a few things that are probably not ready for prime time. And I'll leave that to you all to question me on. But suffice it to say, there are some things we looked at that we concluded would not be cost effective. And we have tried very hard to be tough-minded and realistic, because the true sustainable energy future is one that is not just sustainable from an environmental point of view, but also sustainable from an economic point of view, with a public that's willing to pay for it and a business world that can thrive with it. So that's where we're headed from the point of view of the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's really interesting. The Commissioner brings up a point that we suddenly are dealing with natural gas, which is something that was, we had based all of our pricing on natural gas in the past, but we never had supplies that we have now. And that's the thing about energy. The minute you begin to sort of think that you understand the world of energy, it changes. And the technology is now allowed for a fracking technology that has suddenly made natural gas everywhere and suddenly more readily available. So part of our building this comprehensive energy strategy was to create a bridge to renewables by understanding that natural gas is a place to be for those who want it, as we move towards renewables that can be sustained. And I really want to talk to actually George and Jeff right now to get a sense, because we, in the world of the legislature and the world of all of this policy discussion, as it migrates out through the granite walls into the real world, George and Jeff are really good at understanding what's really going on. And so we'll start with Jeff for a minute, because you've been working in these issues for a long time. What's really happening out there? You're doing design and build for companies and manufacturing. What's selling? What are they looking for? What's working?
Sure. Well, thank you, Lonnie. I think a couple of things that Dan had said. It really is a package deal. That's what we're seeing out there now. So in the world that I work in, we do generally speaking construction for the commercial businesses, manufacturing, etc. We're seeing a lot of companies very interested in taking advantage of and exploiting as many of the state programs and the utility programs that are out there for energy efficiency. And the challenge really is, how do you make these investments when you have so many, limited cash, but you really do want to build a building that is energy efficient today and for the future. And, I really think, Dan, the governor and yourself and Lonnie as legislatures, you really have done a fine job at giving us the tools and giving a lot of companies the tools, because we're seeing a lot more growth and investment in people willing to do whole building modeling, as an example, to understand what can they do with insulation, with fenestration, with high efficiency air conditioning or heating systems. And it's really beginning to pay off. We are seeing more and more projects where the owners now, really embrace this, and even more important, architects, who are probably, the most largest group of naysayers sometimes, right? And we're really seeing that engagement come back in from that side as well. We're also involved in a lot of the renewable technologies, such as solar thermal, which is the heating of hot water. We actually did a project with George's company about a year ago at a very large hospital, and I still think it's probably the largest solar thermal installation in the state of Connecticut. And this hospital, basically heats the majority of their domestic hot water with solar thermal. We do an awful lot of solar PV on buildings within Connecticut, small systems around the 50,000 watt size all the way up to 500,000 watts. I see a lot of manufacturers, interestingly enough, in the state of Connecticut that are looking at a means to help their bottom line. They realize that it's not so much the cost of energy, but the unpredictability of energy. And you're right, gas and fracking have created a fantastic opportunity where gas prices have gone down. In the case of solar, where they're generating electricity, they know for 25 years it's a constant, reduction in their cost of electricity. And the incentives that the utilities have, enabled, and the cost decreases in solar have really made this a viable program for a lot of companies.
So, good news.
Yes, I think it's great news. I think it's great news.
George, I want to hear from you as well. So what are you finding in terms of people's willingness to really invest and really do that now as opposed to how they were hanging back maybe a couple of years ago?
Sure, and I think we have to break it out into two different areas, residential and commercial or institutional. We work in both markets as consultants, so we go out and try to talk to the different groups. In the residential market, we're part of CL&P's program for new residential construction, so that's a building up new, or the home energy solutions, which is going in and doing the blower door tests and looking at a house, which we recommend everybody do. So we try to break these up into two different areas. I really do believe in the low-hanging fruit, and we miss that sometimes. Often we'll get a phone call from someone that said, I want to do geothermal and solar thermal and solar PV on my building. And we go in and say, well, the first thing you should really do is seal your windows, put a little insulation in the walls, let's wrap that water heater. And quite honestly, that's not very sexy, but it's really important. So getting to the base is what we need to do. We try to direct people into low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of it out there. And then get into the renewables of the solar thermal and solar electric or a geothermal. Just as you said with gas and oil, we did many studies in the past where gas and oil, we're battling it out back and forth, but gas now has come so down far in its pricing that we really like that as a product because it's lower maintenance and higher in efficiency. So the owner of a building has little less to do with that product than with some of the other older fossil fuel products. So we really do like to tend towards lower maintenance and higher efficiency. So we really start seeing our clients going more towards once we kind of direct them to, okay, you're right, let's spend $10,000, $20,000 and build the building envelope better, and then take it to the renewables and start looking at what the government and the state is providing and try to use those programs to benefit the owner to, again, take the biggest bang for the buck. So let's get back to building envelopes, let's get back to high efficiency light fixtures, some of the simple stuff, and direct them there. And then that programs, and with new rebates and loan programs that are out there for efficiency programs, really enact those and get it going. As well as now with the PACE program. I'm on my local energy task force. We are on PACE in our town. We had our first project going through on PACE. We think it's a great program. We pushed it. Our first selectwoman, Kathy, was really behind it. So those type of programs the state is doing is helping the business community start to figure out how this works and how the banking community then folds in with them. So those type of programs really start to generate direction for us.
Can I take a 10-second interlude to explain the PACE acronym? Because those of us in this world tend to speak in acronyms, but PACE, P-A-C-E, is Property Assessed Clean Energy. It's a structure that allows us to finance, as the state, investments in efficiency, in conversions to natural gas, in renewable power, at lower interest rates than might otherwise be available, because the repayment is guaranteed on the local property tax bill. So it's a repayment mechanism that in effect de-risks the investment of whatever bank is putting up the money, makes it very attractive to particularly, it's all commercial at this point, but to the building owner to undertake a project because they're getting a very attractive cost of borrowing and therefore can do the projects they want to do. This has turned out to be a huge success and is really one of our big breakthroughs. And what really I should have mentioned is another core element of our strategy, and that is to emphasize creating attractive financing for both commercial enterprises and for the households, so that they can take on these ideas and make them affordable. In many cases, with on-bill repayment options that allow us from even the first month to have people saving money with the amount they pay for the new project they've undertaken, the repay a loan, less than the energy savings. So they really are getting a big deal from month one. But I'm sure we're going to hear about this from our Green Bank representative right now.
Yes, that's an excellent segue into hearing from Kelly. And I think, it was so interesting being House Chair of the Energy Committee I was getting all these calls, talk about a program that's demand-driven. So I was getting a lot of calls from Brantford companies saying, I really want to do the CPACE thing, but I don't think Brantford's a member. So I start calling, the various folks that make things happen in Brantford. Oh, no, we haven't done that yet. I said, you need
don't
to get
say
on
that.
it. No, we have.
All right.
We've now done it. But it was one of those things, talk about demand-driven, that was out in the community and people were hearing about it and wanted a piece of the action. And, we had so many things going on locally that we evidently had not made that happen. We've now made it happen. We're very excited about it. And Kelly, I'm going to ask you. Carrie. What did I say? Carrie, sorry.
It's all Irish.
But we'll hear from Carrie Kelly. Because I really want to hear from you about how this is working and why it's so genius.
Great, thanks. So I brought show and tell. I brought slides. I figured, wake us up. And let me just bring it up here. Get it set up. So thank you, everybody, for inviting me tonight. And I'm going to talk about the Clean Energy Finance and Investment Authority, the state's green bank. And I'm going to talk about the residential side of things, and I'm going to address the what's affordable. I'm happy to take questions on all the other programs we have as well. But I thought I'd address the what's affordable question on renewables and talk to you about what's going on in the state. Because I think from my perspective, there's some really interesting stories about renewables, kind of untold stories on the residential side. Just really quickly, who is the Green Bank? We were created by the legislature, Representative Reed and our leadership and the governor's leadership back in 2011. And our goal is to attract more investment into the clean energy sector in Connecticut using our very limited public dollars. So we'll take a little bit of public money and use that to attract a lot of private capital into the clean energy sector. And that's all the things we've talked about today: energy efficiency, gas conversions, renewable energy, transportation infrastructure like electric vehicle charging stations, things of that nature. So quick picture. This is a picture of homes, and homes that are all great for solar. So some facts. In terms of residential solar PV in the state, we have 25 megawatts of residential solar PV in the state currently. It's almost 4,000 homes now. And we think when we look out at the potential of residential solar electric, that we could probably reach about 150,000 homes. So we've really just scratched the surface of the potential for solar energy here in Connecticut. So in thinking about, when I look at, so this chart, there's a lot going on in the chart. The news in the chart is, look at how the bars have come down here. To me, the news is, if we look at the price of solar from 2007 down to 2013, the price keeps coming down, and it's becoming more and more affordable. And for most folks, when they think solar energy, folks in this room may be really knowledgeable about alternative energy, but most folks think solar totally not affordable, not ready for prime time, not reliable. And so one of the things that we have to do a better job of is explaining to folks that solar is becoming more affordable, and Connecticut in particular has been doing a lot to drive down the price of solar. Just look at what's happened in the last few years. How do we start accomplishing, if I go back here to those nearly 4,000 homes, a good chunk of those, 1,200 of those homes have been done just in the last 2 years. Really, really strong acceleration of installations in residential. Partly that's by really interesting, innovative, community-based marketing campaigns where communities are taking on that, how do we tell neighbors about solar and how do we make it really accessible and not a strange thing, but a totally acceptable, normal thing, because I see it when I drive around my community. People have it on their house. It's not scary. So the Solarize campaign is one innovative example of how you get the word out to folks. Another crazy, scary chart. What's the takeaway from this chart? 4 communities ran Solarize campaigns, and every single one of them had at least a doubling in just a short time. A 3-4 month campaign doubled the amount of solar in that 3 to 4 months that was put in those communities than had been done in the past 7 or 8 years. Wow, just like that, 3 to 4 months. Why? Because the word started getting out, neighbor to neighbor. It's the Malcolm Gladwell, the tipping point. You get neighbors talking to neighbors, and all of a sudden, things that seem hard are not so hard because everybody's doing it. It's what our community does. We put solar on the roof. So we're now taking that out and we're starting to market. So one of the things we haven't done a great job of is marketing and letting people know that there are great options for solar. So we're creating some tools for those that are solar curious. We have a new campaign called Go Solar Connecticut. You can go to a website. You can find out about the different financing options. You can put in your address and get a really high level sense of whether your home's right for solar, and then get connected to an installer who's going to help you figure out whether or not your home's really right for solar. So really quickly, I'm just going to dive into some of the financing options. And I'm going to, again, focus on solar, but there are lots of stories that we could tell about financing energy efficiency and gas conversions as well. So we have 3 solar financing options that we offer at the Green Bank to residents of Connecticut. We have something called the Smarty Loan. One of the things we love about the Smarty Loan is you can do anything with a Smarty Loan. Anything that's in the comprehensive energy strategy that the folks here have been talking about for residents, you can do it. There are like 40 different technologies that you can do, including electric vehicle recharging stations and natural gas recharging stations if you want to do that in your home. But you can do solar photovoltaic, solar hot water, energy efficiency, gas conversions. And you do this with your local lender. It's really quick, easy, accessible, affordable financing. You can do a 5-year loan, a 7, a 10, a 12-year loan. Here in this area, Liberty Bank, great provider, just came into our program. You have a bank right here, a branch right here in Branford, and they're offering this. And I brought some brochures. They're in the back if you're interested. And it's really flexible. You don't have to have a down payment, and you can finance lots of different things. Then we have a loan product just for solar. If you want to do solar, one of the things about solar energy is you want a pretty long time to pay that loan back. And so we offer a 15-year loan product for solar called the CT Solar Loan. Now, some folks, it's the age-old question, if you're buying a car, you're going to own the car, you're going to lease the car. It's kind of the same thing in solar energy. So leasing options are an important element of how you might go solar. And the folks who are going to lease are maybe a different mindset than the folks who are going to own their system. You may want to lease because you don't want to worry about the maintenance and you want a hassle-free experience. There's a great insurance and warranty program that you get with a CT Solar lease. So it's a really affordable, easy way to go solar. So the point is, lots of different options, including paying cash. You can always do that. You can always finance out of savings and get incentives as well. But it's all about providing customers choice, because there are a lot of, there's no one customer out there. Everybody's got a different way of thinking about it. Okay, some more graphs here. If you're going to lease your system, the point of this graph is that from day one, you can go solar and you can be cash flow positive, money in your pocket. The amount of money that you're going to pay for your monthly lease payments over the course of a year is going to be less than the money you're going to be saving because you went solar. And it keeps getting better each year because we project the price of energy is going to go up over the 20-year period. If you're going to do the CT Solar Loan, you want to own your system. You have to do a little bit of a down payment. You get a great investment tax credit from the federal government sometime around month 18. And then by year 3, you're cash flow positive. So those loan payments make you still ahead of the game because you're producing your own energy. And then after year 15, it's all yours because it's your system. You own it. Smarty, this is the program through Liberty Bank here. Little bit different way of thinking about it. So this is with your local lender. You could do a 12-year loan. And the way to think about this is when you get that investment tax credit, it's going to pay for your loan payments over the next 12 years. Then when you own your system, all that money's coming back to you. So just different ways to think about it. Really quickly, we also, in the lease, the CT Solar lease product, we offer an option for going with solar hot water to heat your water, which is another great option. Just launched that product a week ago, just bringing our first installers into the program. But we're using a manufacturer out of Florida called AET, Alternative Energy Technologies, and you can get an 80-gallon or 120-gallon system, a 2-panel or a 3-panel system. And you know, the thing about solar hot water for residential, and you know, there's not a lot of it yet. It's one that we were talking earlier today. It's like earlier tonight. It's kind of this unknown. You know, it was big in the 70s, and you just don't hear a lot about it in Connecticut. We want to change that, because if you're on oil, heating with oil or propane, or you're on electric, look at that chart. You know, the solar hot water lease, the projections over 15 years of what it's going to cost you to heat your hot water versus if you were on oil or propane or electric. It's a great deal. It's a great deal. So we offer a lease option. You could also get a loan, a Smarty loan, and own it outright if you wanted to. But again, just different options. So I will leave it at that, and that's all I have on residential.
Thanks, Carrie. This is good. I like a PowerPoint.
I just love show and tell, you know.
You know, George, just before we start moving on, I want you to tell us a little bit about what it is like to live in a fully, what did you call it, a zero?
A zero energy home.
A zero energy home. I mean, this is a reality that
Sure.
you're experiencing. What's it like?
So through CLNP, my house was the first award-winning of a zero energy home in Connecticut. And what that means is we have a farmhouse in Killingworth, so very close to here. And that house is heated with geothermal. We have solar electric, and we have solar thermal with the AET panels, the same ones. So on an annualized basis, I have no electric bill, no oil bill, no gas bill. There's no fossil fuels in my house at all. So in April, when we true up with the utility company, I actually get a credit or a check back from the utility company. My home, we keep it warm. It's 70, 72 degrees. We keep it cool in the summertime because we have air conditioning and we have no electric bills. So it's a great environment. We always start, though, with that, what I said earlier, of a building envelope that is excellent. High efficiency appliances, low energy use, light fixtures. So don't burn it first, don't use the fuels, and then make fuels with renewables. Everybody asks the question, you know, what's the payback? In our house, it's about an 8-year payback. We've been there for 4, so we're about halfway there right now. We have done hundreds of tours through my house with the professional community. Jeff's been there as well. Architects, because we are trying to get architects on board with this. And part of our consulting work is to develop other zero energy houses throughout the state. We're doing them also up in Vermont and New Hampshire, creating homes that have zero energy from the grid. No batteries. We're tied to the utility company. So when at nighttime, we're buying back power. During the day, we're shipping power to them. And as soon as we lose power, we all lose power because we don't have batteries. So people say, well, you lost power through a storm. We lose it just like everybody else because we parallel up with the grid. It's a great environment. My house is extremely comfortable. 2 dogs and 3 kids and my wife. And we also have an organic farm that we have pulled into this as well. So we really have tried to pull it together. And the programs we live them, so they're great programs.
Boy, I want to come tour that.
You're more than welcome. Senator Meyer's been there a couple times, and he likes to walk through, and he's been a big advocate for us as well.
Wow. You know, and I think that you make a point, because I think a lot of us think that without battery backup, without battery storage, solar is sort of an ephemeral thing. You know, it works when the sun's out, and in terms of sort of making it a long-term investment, just factor it in. You're still going to have a big capital outlay, but you're saying this is working for you.
Absolutely. And, you know, with batteries, they're very tricky, so I think we believe in maintenance being an issue for all homeowners. I don't want anything to have to be maintained when possible. Batteries are a real maintenance issue. They have a 7-year life, and they're very expensive. So the utility grid is durable. We send it to the utility grid, and there's nothing for us to do I haven't cleaned the panels. I haven't had to do anything in 4 solid years, except for just watching them work, throughout the year. So it's a great thing to have.
You know, Lonnie, I'd like to add to
Yeah,
that.
go ahead.
I think one of the greatest misconceptions about solar electricity that I hear, both residential and commercial, George, to your point about batteries, is that many folks believe they have to have batteries. And in Connecticut, we have a great policy that both UI and CLMP and all the utilities support, and it's an offering called net metering. So in essence, what happens is during the day when you might be at work or you're not using as much electricity as you would at night, all the electricity that you generate goes out into the grid and is absorbed by the grid. And essentially, when you come home and you turn the lights on and you run your washing machine or dryer or whatever, that the electricity, that meter starts to turn the other way, so to speak. So in essence, you don't need batteries. You have the full, reliability of the grid to take on the excess electricity that you generate during the day and bring it back at night. It works out great. Absolutely does.
Although I will say, from a policy point of view, there would still be great benefit to breakthroughs in batteries.
Oh, absolutely.
So that we could actually get to a higher percent of our overall power needs from renewables. Because as long as we don't have good batteries, there's kind of a cap on what we can rely on, either wind or solar for. So, and we've seen some places, Germany notably, where our moderator just was, where they've now reached kind of the outer limit of what can be done with renewables until that battery situation is addressed. Now, having said that there's an issue there, again, with the help of the legislature, we launched this past year an Advanced Energy Innovation Hub at the University of Connecticut in conjunction with a German enterprise called the Fraunhofer Institute that is applied research. And we have got a program going to try and attack some of these tough technology problems, one of which is batteries and storage. That's one of our first 4 priority areas for this Advanced Energy Innovation Hub. So I think one of the things I'm excited about in Connecticut is that we are, and Jeff said this, we are bringing kind of a package approach or a portfolio approach, understanding that we need to do some things on efficiency, some things on renewables, but also some breakthrough thinking and really spurring innovation on things like batteries and storage, on microgrid engineering, on fuel cells. And my favorite of our first areas of focus in this innovation hub is on small-scale hydropower. All of you will know that Connecticut got rich 250 years ago by having lots of fast-moving rivers and streams that were able to drive mills. I keep thinking, what about a small turbine that could get in the flow of a stream or a river and capture that energy that is flowing by us every day of the year? Wouldn't that be a great energy source for the 21st century?
It's so interesting when we sort of talking about, before we open it up to questions, let's talk about a little bit about what's in the pipeline and what may not be quite yet ready for prime time, but has incredible hope. And I remember when we were talking about fuel cells, we had a fuel cell informational, and I was talking to one of the Toyota executives who says that they've got a prototype, a fuel cell car prototype, that you can plug into your house and power your house with it when the electricity goes out. So instead of living in our cars the way we do when we go dark and plug in our cell phones, you can actually have your car contribute to your generation. And we also wrote into, which is actually happening, we wrote into the CES bill anaerobic digesters, which is essentially allowing farms to utilize cow manure to create electricity. Well, that's something we have several farms in our state working on as we speak. Talk a little bit more about maybe, Carrie, you want to talk a little bit about that? About
Oh no, it's me, technology.
that's it? Is anybody calling you to finance anything like this?
Yeah, I don't know that I could speak to that on,
Okay.
on the technology
Well, what
side.
about Jeff? Is it?
I don't know if I have the right experience for the digesters on that.
Okay. George, anybody asking you about it? And
Well, I think.
you're up in farm country.
Sure. I think there are some technologies that we throw the words out like fuel cells as being, oh, it's out there. But there's a long way for fuel cells to go and get incorporated into our society. So while that is something that is there today, the incorporation, and we have a great fuel cell manufacturing base in our own state, is something that makes sense for our projects. The prices of solar, that technology and the advancement of the efficiency in the same size panel is an amazing thing to see. So we are seeing advancement in those products as well. There are technologies in the HVAC or heating, ventilation, and air conditioning worlds outside of geothermal even. There are lots of what they call now the mini splits or
Yes, I was gonna talk
the
about mini
Mitsubishis,
splits.
the VRVs, the Daikin systems, where the efficiency of those heat pumps are phenomenal. They've been used that way for 20 years in Europe and in Asia. Now they're becoming common mainstays inside of our own area. So there are some products that are today, we kind of think is, oh, this is normal. But when we present them to others, they go, wow, I didn't realize that really was out there. So I do feel that there's some good products with that. The other piece of it is to make sure that when we build a new building, to use some of the technologies that we have today and actually use them instead of just saying, oh, you know what, I'm just going to go with that old product. And it's so easy. And once you show somebody the way, they then learn and they believe in that. In my own house, we did lots of training sessions, and what we did is we made sure that all the contractors were not familiar with how to build a house that was a zero energy home. And we gave them a seminar to start and then proved that a good contractor could build a zero energy house just by looking at products that are available today. So technologies are advancing. We're not even using the ones that we have. So I'd like to use the ones we have, and we can get enormous energy savings just by what we have today and incorporating other things in our programs.
It's I see this as an evolution, really. And what I'm seeing in the commercial space, and you can see it beginning to spill over in the residential areas as well. It's where we were 10 years ago with compact fluorescent bulbs, as an example. They weren't adapted quickly, but incentives came out. People started using them, and pretty soon, your house had no incandescent bulbs. We're seeing the same evolution happening today with LEDs. LEDs have gotten incredibly more efficient. They last tremendously longer. The rendition of light is excellent. You would be hard-pressed to know that these are all LEDs in here. We're seeing some innovation in Connecticut. We have installed in several buildings now a small company in Norwalk that manufactures a super high-efficiency skylight with a prismatic dome on the top and a prismatic dome on the bottom, so that it can collect the sunlight, whether the sun is just coming up in the morning or setting in the afternoon, and it takes that sunlight in and disperses it back out into the area. Now, what makes this unique is it's got a insulative value of about R40, which is unheard of in a skylight. Now, add to that, on the inside of this skylight, it is ringed with fluorescent tubes today, soon to be LEDs, and it has a daylighting control. So it knows by the ambient light in the room whether it should power on any of those fluorescent tubes, 2 of them, 4 of them, 8 of them, or 16 of them. And it's a constant up and down where no one would ever know in the room that you were being supplied daylight or sunlight or fluorescent light. So it's this evolution of technologies, and there's some great Connecticut businesses that are jumping on this, and we're glad they're here and we're using them.
It's exciting. Well, speaking about using the technology, we're in a LEED silver building, and when we built the new fire department, we insisted on making that happen, and I'm so excited that we did, because the fire chief is telling me that he loves to run out and see the meter running backwards with solar panels. And it's very nice to know, we're helping pay the bills. So that's it. You wanted to say something, Carrie?
Well, just building on what George had said, the combinations of technologies that are working. When you put something like solar PV in combination with these mini splits for high efficiency heating solutions, if you heat on oil and then you want to go solar, that's great. But what do you do for the heating side of things? These mini splits are a great tool to do in combination with solar. And so part of what we need is we need more companies out there who know how to put these things together. We need the efficiency and heating and cooling guys to play nice with the solar guys and come, deliver solutions together. And we're starting to see a handful of companies that are doing that and offering those integrated solutions. So homeowners don't have to go to 3 or 4 or 5 different places. So the more that we see that, the better it'll be. And then it's better payback all around.
Before I throw it open to questions, I just wanted to speak of something that Commissioner Esty and I were talking about a little bit earlier. Some of the things, the ideas that we really need to fast track some of these ideas even more and make people embrace them. One of the issues that we're having, we begin to look around at what's going to be offline soon. And it's very clear that nuclear is looking for a way out. We're just closing Vermont Yankee. I was just, as the Commissioner said, in Germany, and people were telling me that there's a push there to close down their nuclear because of what happened to Fukushima. And God, I hope they don't have any nuclear in the Philippines. When you really sort of look at how vulnerable it is and how the payback has always been a little questionable to begin with. But the fact is, we in Connecticut have put our nuclear into ISO New England, and it's a little bit more than 50% of what we're getting back. So to have it go offline because of, it's really the pricing, the margins of how much they're getting back in terms of the low cost of natural gas now. So when the pricing structure doesn't work for them anymore, they suddenly go away. And actually, Dominion, which is doing a very good job, I have to say, of running our nuclear, since I used to be a journalist, and I covered it when Northeast Utilities was running it, and that was a disaster. So Dominion knows how to run nuclear power plants, but Dominion is also into the natural gas end of things, and they are beginning to export natural gas actually to even Japan. So you begin to they say they're committed to us, but one wonders. So,
well, and even at the outside, these are committed out to 2035 and 2040.
Yes.
So there's an outer limit, which in terms of energy infrastructure requires action like tomorrow to make sure that we're not left in a difficult situation out at the end of those lifetimes.
Exactly. So anybody have ideas of how we can even fast track it more by getting people to embrace, more renewables and more alternatives and more efficiencies even faster?
I think it's just getting the word out that they are not, crazy fringe technologies, because I think, mainstream, folks still don't think of these renewable technologies yet because they don't see them everywhere yet, unless you live in a handful of communities that really have a high concentration. So I think it's our job to just, let everyone know these are reliable technologies, they're affordable technologies, they're a great solution, they're really important to Connecticut's future, they're great local jobs. These are local companies installing these systems, and they're creating jobs here. And so I think it's, it's neighbors talking to neighbors and telling folks that, these are great solutions.
And Jeff, what are you finding? Are companies
Yeah,
willing to move faster?
I think they are. I think that, the biggest hurdle we had and benefit we had was the economy. The economy slowed down. People were very much looking at the bottom line when they build a building, when they renovate a building. So, things like energy, long-term expenses in a building or a home are something that now gets a lot of attention. And I think for the first time that I've seen in many, many years, there is, Dan, to your credit, and Lonnie, there are some very good cohesive packages and programs that your utility companies will offer you, just as George said, on the residential side, on the commercial side. And it's all really about the holistic being of the building and when you're home. And I would really encourage you to kind of seek out what those programs are at the state level and at your utility level. And from Sophia as well. I learned a couple things here tonight that I wasn't aware of, the Smart E-Loan. So, they're trying. I think what could help us is just, it's tell them again. It's advertisements, it's success stories, and it's what your neighbors see and what you see. And I think, the ball starts moving very slowly, and it builds up momentum, and that's how programs flourish.
I'd also like to add to that, the Solarized Durham was run by Be-Free Solar, and one of the owners of Be-Free is also on the Energy Task Force from my town, so we had a lot of time to talk about it. And he really said, when my neighbor did it, I said it was okay. It made sense. It wasn't this scary thing. So the local level, trying to understand the programs that are available at the state, very important. Almost every town has an energy task force where, the local people are talking to their local neighbors. And everybody is starting to understand that we're not trying to harm somebody with this program. We're not, the task force are all volunteers. And we're trying to do this for the good of our neighbors. And that builds the confidence of it. Use your task force, use your town. They're not making money on this. So they have no axe to grind or no profits to make. And utilize those programs, and they then get generated out to the neighbors. And then it starts to snowball. And in a good way, so.
And then use your local installers. We have over 70 companies that can offer the solar rebates that are available. We have, 116 contractors in the Smarty program across every sort of technology you could imagine. So these are, you can find someone in your neighborhood. And if they're not, have them call us and we'll get them trained. So.
And when people call Cephia, do you have facilitators to walk them through what their options are?
We use the Energize Connecticut website, and so there's an email and there's 800 numbers that support that. So and then we can absolutely help them. But we're really trying to work with our contractors, because the contractors are the ones in people's homes, and it's those contractors that really need to understand how to bring solutions together.
Good. Well, I think it's time to open it up for questions. What do you think?
Sure.
Anybody want to? Yes, sir.
I'm usually loud enough not in the microphone.
You're on television
I
now.
know.
Yeah. Tell us your name.
My name is Ben Martin. I live in Wallingford, so I have actually 2 questions. The first being, I found that most of these programs aren't available to me because I have municipal electric, so if you could address ways to get that way. The second being that, given that Professor Mark Jacobson says that we can be 100% renewable energy by 2030, and the fact that it's been shown that the methane emissions from fracking and transportation of natural gas are almost worse for the climate and for pollution than carbon or soot, why was that included in the portfolio as expanding these pipelines out, which are leaking methane into the air? So,
Do you want to do first the one?
I'll do the first part about being with a municipal co-op. So the answer is a little bit, it depends. A program like the Smarty loan or the CT Solar loan, anyone in Connecticut, doesn't matter who your utility is. For things like the solar rebates and the solar lease product, for the solar lease, you have to be a UI or a CLMP customer, but not for solar hot water. That's on the PV side. For the rebates, we do have the ability to work with the municipal co-ops. It's usually on a case-by-case basis, and so if you're interested, I would say work with your electric company and come to Cephia, and we'll see what we can do. We definitely see some of those projects come through, not at scale, but they definitely come through. So I think that covers the financing side of things. And on the electric utility side, for the efficiency side, there are definitely rebate programs available. They may not be at exactly the same level, and they vary from municipal utility, but there are definitely some programs available.
I'd just like to add to that my experience in working with Wallingford Electric has been excellent, and they are very willing to listen to any ideas you have. They don't participate in the same programs,
Right.
but they do have funds
Similar.
available. They call them different names, but they do have funds available for energy efficiency and solar and some of the other aspects.
And lastly, the federal income tax credit is available to everybody.
That's
Correct.
right.
And that's a
of course.
30% number, and that's a tax credit, not a deduction, so it's real money coming off,
Yes.
the bottom line. We find that gets sometimes missed, but 30% of a true dollar is a lot of money.
Dan, did you want to talk about the fracking methane concerns? Because I know it's something that DEEP is really looking at in terms of.
I thought you were going to do that. No, I'm happy to do it. First of all, I think there are very real issues with regard to fracking. And our comprehensive energy strategy details these to some extent and insists that Connecticut will require that the natural gas that's being brought in meet the highest environmental standards in terms of extraction and transmission so as to minimize the environmental harms. And there's questions around the chemicals used in fracking, questions around water used in fracking, questions around whether earthquakes might be caused by fracking. And then most significantly, as you highlight, is the risk of leakage of what is methane, a very potent greenhouse gas, 23 times more radiative forcing than carbon dioxide. So these are very real issues and do require high standards and significant regulatory effort. And I think some states, New York, for example, is honing in on quite tough standards and appropriate ones, and some other states, Pennsylvania, for example, not nearly where it needs to be. We have also set for the pipelines in Connecticut a zero leak standard, which historically may have been hard to hit. In the modern day, is very much achievable. Now, I think the question, you offered a premise, which I think has to be pushed back on, and that is that the studies have not shown that fracking leads to more leakage that makes the use of natural gas a net negative. In fact, the most recent study out of the University of Texas shows a much lower degree of leakage from fracking than had been expected. And so I think we've got a...
I'm sorry. I don't know if you want to get this on tape or not, but from what I've read, that University of Texas study was paid for by the fracking industry.
No, that's,
and it's been debunked in the months
right.
since it came down.
No, it was actually done with the Environmental Defense Fund. So
Receives money from the fracking industry.
no, the Environmental Defense Fund receives no money from any company whatsoever. It's one of the most respected environmental groups in the country. So you can go on their website, and they are extremely highly regarded and receive $0 from any corporate source. So there is an ongoing debate, as there should be. There's an ongoing need for considerable effort to track what is the best science on this. But the current best science is that there is some leakage, but not enough to offset what is the significant advantages of natural gas, which burns again with half the emissions of coal and a fraction as well of oil. So if we were to convert, as I think we're in the midst of converting, our electric generating sector from burning coal and burning oil to burning natural gas, we will make a huge stride towards decarbonizing our society. And frankly, having been involved in this issue for a couple of decades, I was part of the team that negotiated the Framework Convention on Climate Change of 1992. And from 1992 to the economic downturn of 2007, we made no progress, zero progress in terms of reducing the greenhouse gas emissions of our society. We have in the last few years, partly because of the economic downturn, but even more so because of the conversion of very many different industrial processes and power generation efforts to natural gas, we have begun to tip down our emissions curve. So I think there's every reason to believe that natural gas is an important bridge to a sustainable energy future. It's certainly not the ultimate answer. I would hope over 25 or 30 years we'd get to a zero emissions future by finding the costs of solar or of wind or of, various other possibilities, tidal power, wave power, any number of things might come in and eclipse the need for fossil fuels altogether. But we're not there now. And at least at the present moment, I think natural gas is an important part of what several people have described here as a package, or I like to describe as a portfolio approach, where you're trying a number of different things because you don't know where the cost curves will come down, you don't know what the science will show, and you want to have your bets placed in a number of directions.
I think, too, that most people don't realize that we have natural gas going through Connecticut to other states who actually have, they call it a penetration rate. So they actually use more than we do. So it goes through to Massachusetts, which is 50%, about 50% in Rhode Island. I think it's 65 in New York, 75 in New Jersey.
Right.
And we have a 31% penetration rate. And so part of why we created the strategy, not only to create a bridge to the future, and we have to retire what coal we're still burning, but demand-driven. Our phones are ringing off the hook with people who just do not want to pay for home heating oil anymore, and they're really frustrated that they see natural gas around them in their neighborhoods, and there's no expansion happening that's going to allow them to affordably take advantage of a more affordable fuel. So all of these things have an upside and a downside. I mean, when you talk about wind, you have blade fling and, I mean, it's vibration, hum. When you talk about solar, there's a huge concern about the manufacturing process in China that makes solar PV affordable. There are all kinds of downsides that have to be factored into the risk benefits analysis. And it's, it always comes down to a frustrating place of choosing a diversified portfolio that gives people more choice, but it's also moving us to a future, where we have zero emissions and where we have renewables as the most sustainable way of achieving energy. Anybody else have a question?
Coming over here.
Bill Horn.
Hi, I'm Bill Horn. I live here in Branford. I looked into PV for my house about 8 years ago, less than that. But anyway, it's an old house. It's not sited exactly properly. It doesn't, the roofs aren't really up to holding at least what's available now. We can always hope that they'll get lighter. I recently heard about some projects up in Massachusetts which were essentially community solar fields. And I'm wondering, in terms of your solarizing communities, if there's any thought in going in that direction, so that the older houses that may not support their own systems could buy into a communal solar system.
So we have new legislation that would support that model, but it's new, right? Very new, and
Right.
we haven't yet seen. Have we seen a project come through the ZREC portfolio? That
I don't
would
think
take
we've seen one,
advantage?
but we've talked to people about it because it's a nice idea where,
Yes.
anyone who has a north-facing main roof is not in good shape. Anyone with a tree-shaded roof is not in good shape. But what if they were willing to put up the capital for their neighbor or for the school at the end of the block? What if you got 10 neighbors together to get a solar array put up? It's a very attractive option. And with what Jeff was describing, which is the net metering concept, you could all claim a piece, like a community garden, your share of the solar power being generated off the shared rooftop array down the street. So my view is this is, again, a function of getting the right financing package in place and creating the incentives so that people can band together and do what's a good thing for themselves and the community by building out this solar network possibility. So I think there is legislation that's being put forward to make it possible. I would love to see it, and I think it's a logical extension of where we've been with our Green Bank.
And I also think that the Solarize sort of campaign that gets everybody excited in a community about solar, adapting that to this community solar concept would work really well here in Connecticut. We love our towns. We
And-
love to contribute to our towns.
In Massachusetts, they have a community-based virtual net metering program, and that's really what you're talking about. Build a 100 kW ground mount system in a farm area or someplace where you could get good solar views, and then basically aggregate everybody's meter to that, and you all get a portion of that. That requires legislation to make that all happen. Even at the town base right now, there's virtual net metering for the communities, so that you can put it on, let's say in our town, we have a large public works garage. Put a large system on that garage and then aggregate or assign 5 meters to that system. So I think, we're seeing a movement towards that. It is legislation that makes that happen, because really it's how does it get parceled up in the bill. And so virtual net metering, community-based, I think it's a great program. I think more people will go ahead and employ that if it made sense.
I was thinking about sort of, like a larger single array somewhere. We've got a couple sites here in Branford that I think would be good candidates for something like that. So.
Bill's the kind of guy who makes those things happen.
Well, it
so.
would be exciting to see, and Branford is the kind of place that could probably organize people to get it done. I would love to see that. I think it's a great opportunity, and I think it is the wave of the future because you can't count on every house doing it on its own.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Martin Ewing. I recently did a conversion in our house from oil to gas, and And I was motivated to do that because I didn't like oil, but also because there was a payback. I figure now maybe 6 or 8 year payback on that project, and which I thought was very favorable.
What's it done to your bills?
It's cut in about a half.
That's great.
And what I'd like to do is focus on what's the motivation for a consumer like me, and what can we do today or in the next little while to that makes sense economically. The second most motivating, or maybe even the most motivating thing for me, is reliability. And what do we do during storms? And I'm willing to spend considerable money to upgrade my utilities to ensure reliability. The only thing I can do as an individual is buy a generator, which I have done, of course, very environmentally negative when I'm running it. But many people are also installing systems based on natural gas generation, which is sort of combining a couple of themes tonight. But I would like to know what we're doing about reliability and whether there's any way to leverage people's concerns about reliability with the environmental improvements that we're also talking about. I'm a little disappointed that the PV story doesn't include local energy storage. That is, you don't have the ability to operate off the grid entirely. And if I was going to go into a big project like that, that's something I'd really want.
I'll address just quickly. So did you do a home energy solution study on your house before you upgraded your heating equipment?
We did just recently.
Okay, so, and I love that program because it's $75 funded by this
Right.
through ratepayer.
That was
So it
very
helps
impressive.
pick some things up. If your house is well insulated and well sealed and the like on those cold October snowstorms that we have, where we lose power, your house you'll ride through. So from a nano point of view, your own house, taking care of your environment so you don't lose the heat to the outside so quickly, I think is important. On the battery issue of why I don't like batteries versus, putting them in, is the cost of a single battery pack is far more than a generator cost.
Well, indeed, a generator would be an alternative
Right.
for my.
So, a gas-fired generator is a lower point of entry into it, and I think cleaner than batteries that you'll have to replace in 7 years. And although I get 95% recycling on a battery, it's a lot of energy to make that battery happen. So I think a generator is an easier approach for most people to get into to solve that problem. And I'm just talking nano at your house. As soon as you get onto the streets, we talked to the commissioner about how he takes care of that part.
I will share with you in our Solarize campaigns around the state that we're doing, your mindset around, I want to go solar because I want to be independent from the grid is very much shared. It is a sentiment out there. But I do think, when we think about what's not quite ready for prime time, batteries are in that camp. And because of the issues that George, so eloquently pointed out. So we've got more work to do there because it's definitely a consumer demand and desire. Take me off the grid. Give me independence. Give me control of my energy costs. That's the whole empowering myself to be in control of my energy costs and off the grid because of, if you've been out of power for
Yeah, I don't
days
care
or
about
weeks.
control so much as just keeping the power on.
But thank you for highlighting
Yeah,
another point,
it's
and
really
George alluded to it as well, which is that people who buy backup diesel generators do a great environmental disservice while they're getting reliability. And in the days right after the Irene storm, we had one of our worst couple of air pollution days, our worst episode of air pollution in a decade, because so many people had fired up their diesel generators. So it is definitely the case. You want to go to a natural gas generator if you're going to go for backup. And it is also the case the battery backup is challenging. The economics certainly don't work, and frankly, the environmental perspective, it's not ideal either. And while we're at what's not on at the present moment, a lot of people ask, with regard to the reliability question, why not undergrounding of all of our wires? And the answer is cost. We looked at this, 17,000 miles of wires across the state of Connecticut. it would be $20 to $25 billion to underground them all. So that's where we went back from that, because it's very hard to justify that scale of expense. We went to the strategy of tree trimming, which, by the way, some people think the DOT is taken to excess, but they are definitely out there trimming trees, and to the hardening of poles, wires, improving the sensors on the lines, and the microgrid strategy, all of which, for a very small fraction, is, we think, improving reliability, improving resiliency, and particularly improving the quality of life during a prolonged outage. So, you know, we're trying a multiple prong approach.
It's always so, I mean, it's so interesting when you're talking about microgrid, because Carrie's absolutely right. What people want is to get off the grid, and yet we want it to hang out there waiting for us, you know, in case we need it, which is a very expensive proposition, because we want them to be operational, we want them to be up and running, and if we need to hook onto them, we need to have them there. And so trying to figure out that dilemma of how it works, how we can cut our expenses, but also, you know, figure out a way to keep it, you know, operational. And the thing I also noticed during Irene and actually Sandy as well is when we lost power in Branford, and I was driving around with the emergency crews to some of the neighborhoods who were the last to get back on. One of the neighborhoods in our community that was the last to get back on had underground wires. And one reason was they didn't have the smart underground wires with the sensors along the way, so nobody knew where the breaks were. They were underground. And so this became the other thing that it hadn't even occurred to me, that just because they're underground doesn't mean that they're, you know, not vulnerable to some level of breakage. And unless you smarten them up, which is also a concern because you have security concerns, the more we put sensors on wires, you know, that's something that we're going to need to keep an eye on as well. So that was very interesting. The panaceas are always, you know, they don't exist. It's always very, very complicated. Does anybody else have any more?
Or let me just say about the undergrounding. It also turned out in Storm Sandy that undergrounding, which was done a lot in New York City, was a disaster, because when the conduits flooded, there was a really severe damage, and it couldn't be undone, and in many cases you couldn't even figure out where the harm was. Yeah. So the theme, which our beloved chair has, I think, stressed, is really the right one, which is trade-offs. Everywhere along the line, trade-offs. And that's one of the things that I think our legislative committee has really done a brilliant job on, is sharpening the focus through a lot of give and take and a lot of debate on what those trade-offs are, where there's benefits, what the costs are, and how to kind of put together a mix that, if not optimized, is pretty close. I really admire what Lonnie and her co-chair have done in terms of positioning Connecticut for a thoughtful path forward.
Another question?
Hi, thank you for all being here, and I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this. And the Solarize Connecticut, I think, has gotten a buzz throughout the state that we haven't seen in marketing, since you're bringing up in marketing. So I'm kind of confused about, or would like to know a little bit more about what is the problem with the marketing, because I think it could really take off within the state. And I have a couple of comments, so I don't know if somebody wants to comment on that.
So when we look at Cephia and its products, it's really one of timing. We just launched our products. We've just got them out and just started to train our contractors on them. And now we're coming out with marketing, because you're absolutely right. We haven't, up until now, done a good job marketing our programs, and we need to do a much better job. So Solarize is a great example of doing a good job at a really local level. And energy, when we think about energy in our homes, you know, we're all very busy, and we're only going to pay attention if someone else is doing it, and we see it, and we're like, oh, I should do that too. So Solarize is a great example of that. So we're trying to take some of those learnings and say, well, how can we now apply that statewide? How can we build up testimonials and case studies? Just tell stories of folks like you who've done a gas conversion and half their energy bill is, you know, gone away. So we just, you know, that's where we're turning our attention next, now that we have all these great products out there. Tell the
Carrie,
story.
if I could just add to that, and the Energize CT website is really an attempt to pull things together so you don't have to go to 6 different places, but it's a portal into a whole lot of places that you might find critical information.
That's right. And so when we're doing Facebook promotions of our products, we're doing that on Energize Connecticut's website, and we're promoting that through posts that residents all over the place see. And we target it based on, Branford's a community that we target because we know it's an active community. You care about energy issues. So we're trying to target around the state where our residents really focused on this anyways.
So does that have something to do with funding with the program, that you target certain communities? Because I know that some of these programs have run out of money, after a certain length of time. So is that a policy issue?
Well, the running out of money is a function of a historic problem with how these programs were designed, which there was a limited pool of funds and they had a one-year budget. So that if they did more projects by August or September than they had budgeted for the year, then they had to shut down their funding of new projects. And that was particularly true of the energy efficiency incentives. And that frankly was a disaster. So we've moved away from that one-year budgets to three-year rolling budgets so you can borrow forward as needed. And it really is not only dislocating for the homeowner or the folks calling to try to get benefits, but worse yet for the home energy solutions companies who would have to lay off their staff for months at a time. So, and one of the things we are very excited about is Connecticut's really become a hotbed of clean energy economy growth. Energy efficiency companies, renewable installer companies, the conversions, all of this, as well as the innovation work, has really made Connecticut a boom town from a sort of green energy, clean technology point of view. So we're trying to get away from what I would call policy problems or programmatic failures that existed that undermine this. And you've highlighted one of the ones we have, I think, gotten our arms around and been able to address.
We're coming to the end of our time together. Yes.
Just checking to see what time we were.
We have a solar system on the roof.
8:30, okay. So we were going to end in.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'll get to you, but this lady has been having her hand
So I
up,
guess
I
we'll
wanna
do
make sure
two
she
more
can-
questions and
Two
then
more
we'll end.
questions
Yep.
and then we'll.
Mary Weber, I'm a Branford resident. We've been talking about what is available for homeowners and where that's going. As far as the commercial users are concerned, a lot of them are the big users, what is out there to induce companies, nonprofits, I'm thinking hospitals, schools, to get with the program?
You want to go with that, Carrie? I mean,
Yeah.
CPACE also covers this.
CPACE, the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Financing Mechanism, has really been, I think, a breakthrough, and Commissioner Ashley talked about this, a breakthrough product for how we can attract property owners to finance these projects. Because one of the challenges you have in commercial is, these can be long paybacks. They can be paybacks that are beyond 10 or 12 years, out to 15 or 20 years. And before CPACE, we didn't have financing that could go out 20 years. And now, because your repayment is on the property bill and that repayment stays with the property, if you sell the property to the next property owner, now as a property owner, you're not thinking, oh, I'm only going to hold this property for 5 years, or I don't know how long I'm going to do it, so I don't want to invest. And so that barrier has been removed. And the financing is very attractive. The terms, the rates that property owners can receive are very attractive. And so we've seen this, kind of sweep through municipalities across Connecticut wanting to come into this program and be able to offer this to their property owners. That also can work for nonprofits. You don't have to just be a business. As long as your municipality will issue a tax ID and issue a tax bill or a property assessment to you, you can take advantage of this for nonprofits as well. So I really think CPACE in combination with the already existing energy efficiency fund finance rebates that come through the utilities, great combination.
And I would
Whole new world.
And I would just add to that, there's a whole series of additional programs. And by the way, we shouldn't understate, this CPACE program is the first in the country to do it on a statewide basis, and therefore to be able to aggregate all these projects into a block, and in doing so, get private financial support at very attractive rates. So it is, again, an example, and I want to stress this, where a good policy framework is really positioned Connecticut for vibrant investment by lots of people in these projects. And it's exciting to see, and I think you're hearing from both Jeff and George that this is now on the ground happening in a big way. But in addition, there's, in the legislation that Lonnie helped draft, a significant program for what's known as combined heat and power for industrial facilities that allows them to do power generation and capture the waste heat for industrial processes, special incentives to promote that. We also have a structure that we call ZREC and LREC, zero emissions renewable energy credits and low emissions renewable energy credits, that is a way for businesses, and it's being taken advantage of by a lot of people that have got big roofs, to attractively finance by getting a commitment to sell whatever power they produce on their rooftop back to the utilities for defined rates out over a fixed period, a power purchase agreement. And we're doing that from a policy point of view on what's known as a reverse auction. So we try to get the lowest possible cost for the ratepayer, but it has proven to be very attractive for businesses as a way to defray energy bills. So we've got a series of structures in place to support energy efficiency, renewable power, conversions to natural gas, investment in combined heat and power programs, all with attractive flow of finance that makes it quite doable. And I think as exciting as it is to see these options available to homeowners, even more critical to have our businesses have access and to be improving their competitive position in a very competitive world. And I think it was Jeff who said earlier, in a tough economy, these opportunities to cut your energy spend go straight to the bottom line. Extremely valuable from a business point of view. So it's, in my mind, very exciting to have this suite of processes and products and financing options out on the table.
Dan, I'd just like to add to that. I think that the whole ZREC program and the LREC program, specifically on the ZREC program, it is the best program, barring any state in the United States. And the reason for that is because it's a 15-year long-term contract with utilities. So any entity, whether you're a nonprofit entity or a taxable business, you now know what the financial pattern is going to look like for the first 15 years of the 30-year life of a solar system. So what that does for you is it makes the financial justification very easy, and it allows investors, specifically for nonprofits, to be able to provide you what we call leasebacks or power purchase agreements, where you can get a solar system, and just like the lease that Sophia offers on the residential side, it can be offered to municipalities, to hospitals, to any nonprofit. It works very well.
It fulfills a couple of other things we really had as a target of our broader policy. Transparency, so people knew what they were getting. Predictability, so people could make this plan looking out. And de-risking the investment. So you get, as Jeff's pointing out, clarity over what you have to put up, what the power company is going to pay you, and it's really, at that point, no risk. So you can borrow money at very attractive rates because it's not got a big risk premium built into your cost of capital.
And we just installed on our own building, we own our own office building in Middletown, a system, and went through the ZREC auction, so we've done it ourselves. And it's a great program. And once you get through the auction, and if you're selected with the low bid, you can install this. And a 15-year, basically for 15 years now, we're going to get a check from the utilities, per se, really from the state, where it's going to fund the purchase of this installation. And we have about an 8 to 9 year payback on our installation. So from a business point of view, we've taken advantage of it. We've done it, and we were the first phase through it. We kind of like to do things and then prove that they can be done, and then bring them out to the client base. So it's been a good program, and we are taking advantage of it.
And let me just say, it works from a business point of view. From a policy point of view, I'm excited because I made him compete against 10 other people, and he had to offer me the lowest payment from the state's coffers, from the ratepayer base. So we got a good deal because he had to really sharpen his pencil and make sure that the economics worked in order to win one of these highly sought after and competitively fought over ZREC contracts. And the ZREC, by the way, again, is for zero emissions, so that would be wind, solar, and there's a separate program of LREC, low emissions, that would be for fuel cell or biomass. So we're allowing all the different technologies to fight it out in the marketplace. And again, we don't pick, we let these guys pick and tell us what they want to do.
No, it's right, and it was very exciting to bring, and I think that's one reason that the legislature from both parties really signed on. It was really great to be able to infuse a level of competition into this area of the energy market, because there was sort of this ongoing idea that we kept having to subsidize and build bigger and bigger and bigger subsidies, and we were creating industries that were creating their foundations on depending on subsidies and actually making us compete. I mean, we would have them come before us in Connecticut and say, well, we can get more money if we go to New Jersey. So it felt like extortion. And now we've got a situation in which the subsidies are as seed money, but they're not forever, and we're making them compete. And guess what? They're coming in with rational prices, and we're into a whole new, it's a game changer, and it's really exciting. We have one more question from Jan.
Well, the problem now is that things have been elevated to such a high level of discussion that I'm embarrassed.
No,
but
Jan, you always ask the smart
I will
questions.
say that
Jan was in the legislature, so she always comes at it from a lot of layers.
I think you people are all marvelous, and my enthusiasm and respect for the legislature and for all of you is tremendous. I just wish that the public media had a tie to you, because it seems to be just off-the-cuff responses that are somewhat belligerent and uninformed. Now, how can you get the media to at least get the possibilities and facts out to the public instead of all these discussions and opinions against the good things you're trying to do? I did want to say that I live in an old house, because I'm in Branford now and not in Guilford, I can say this. I live in an old house that was built in 1766, but luckily it was moved outside of its home district, so to speak, and avoided being in a historic district. So we can have a solar panel on the back. And that's perfect, you know, a salt box back is perfect for solar panels. And we got to put on in 1973. Wow. So we don't have to use oil in the summertime.
You're always a trailblazer,
but
Jan.
in the historic district, you cannot have a solar panel on your house.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go back and talk to people about that.
And I think our moderator should answer the question about how we elevate the debate.
Well, as a former journalist, we have some very good journalists who are still at work, but it's very concerning to a lot of us who really care about journalism and reporting that a lot of it has gone away, quite frankly, and we're dealing with blogs and a lot of angry discussion that's really uninformed. So I think panels like this and our ability to really try to stay in touch, as Carrie said, they're very interactive, and we all are. We're all very receptive to hearing from you. We've got folks that are right in the community who are really engaged in these issues, and we're always eager to hear from you. And so I think I should say goodnight right now, because
thank you very much. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I'd like to thank our illustrious panel, who has been giving us an evening of great knowledge and information. And thank you all for coming. And as Lonnie just said, they're very accessible, this group of people. So if you didn't get a question, a time to ask your question, I'm sure they would be happy to talk with you. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters.